Our guest today is a true icon, a four-time undefeated boxing world champion with a record of 24-0, a world-class athlete, fitness and wellness advocate, TV host, home chef, founder of the Laila Ali lifestyle brand, which you can explore at lailaali.com, and most importantly, mother to Sydney and CJ, my friend Laila Ali, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for being here. And remember, you can watch the video version of our podcast and see Layla's smiling face at neverloseyourcape.com. Layla, thank you so much for being here. It always brightens my day every time I get to see your face.
I thank you for inviting me. I love seeing your face too. I haven't actually seen you in a while, so it is nice to see you smiling. How have you been
Yeah,
doing?
for sure. I'm doing well. I'm hanging in, 2020 threw all of us for a curveball, but I'm trying to live each day in itself. And I no longer ask people, hey, how's it going? I ask them, how is your today? Because I think
hmm
we need to focus more on living in today instead of worrying about tomorrow. So, um, I love to start this podcast with some fun. So I'm going to ask you two rapid fire questions because these are my favorite questions. Number one, what are you binge watching right now?
I don't binge watch anything. I don't really watch TV. Ha! I bet you weren't expecting that answer. Nope.
I
I
love
don't
it
watch
from
TV.
someone that is in TV. Ladies and
Well,
gentlemen, you just heard it.
I don't
Do you?
watch TV.
Okay, so I'll
Nope.
say, what is your favorite all-time TV show?
Favorite, I will say this. When I do turn on the TV, say if I'm just cooking and there's something on in the background, I turn on HGTV because I love watching these home makeovers and, seeing if people are going to keep their house or list their house. I love cooking shows, things like that. But I would say my favorite popping up in my head from back in the day, I used to love when I did watch TV in my teens and all that, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with Will Smith, Cosby Show. I used to like the Golden Girls, even when I was young. I don't know
Oh,
what that's about.
I
So yeah,
love
those are
it.
some. Of
Cosby was like rush home from school and watch Cosby. That was awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
And then second question, to get some perspective, what was the best thing about quarantine 2020?
Uh, I would say that reconnecting with passions that I have that I didn't take the time to cultivate. I love gardening, even though I'm not very good at it, don't know a lot about it, but I've always had wanted to start a garden, but didn't really have time. So I was able to do that in California before I left because I recently moved. And then, of course, just spending time with the family, really spending quality time, really being more present because you're not in a hurry trying to figure out, you know, how you're going to be prepared to do what you need to do the next day. So we were kind of forced to slow down and really take inventory, of some of the improvements that need to be made within our family, within our home front, and all of that.
I love that answer. And gardening, for those people who have never done it, I dabbled in it a little bit. It can be very cathartic.
Absolutely. And, I'm all about organic, non GMO food. So the only way you're really going to know what's in your food is if you grow it yourself and cook it yourself. So I'm a big proponent for
Exactly. And
that.
kids love it too. It's we got my son a little greenhouse. He loves it. They love to go check on it. It's good responsibility too.
That's cool.
Before we get into the meat of the interview, I'm gonna do something I've never done before. My producer's looking at me like, "Oh God, what is she gonna do?" I'm gonna read something that came into my DMs, and I want you guys all to hear it. So it says, question, what do you do when you can't seem to find hope? Answer, listen to the Never Lose Your Cape podcast. Your podcast has shown me that other people, even famous people, have struggles and challenges just like I do. And I am able to use their tips on perseverance and advice from their own personal toolkits in my own life. And it has really helped me see and find hope again. Thank you.
That's
So that's
amazing.
what this podcast is all about, people. And I thank you to the person that wrote in and said that to me. And I thank you to all of our amazing guests. And today we have one of the most heartfelt people that I've ever met. So we're going to get right into it. When people look at you and hear your name, it is immediately tied to success. And having known you for a long time, and after reading, I read your first book, Reach, a long time ago when I was in my 20s, which I absolutely love and highly recommend. And to all our listeners out there, go buy it on LailaAli.com. That book is all about your childhood and your early adulthood. And when people look at you now, they think of rainbows and cotton candy and just this sunshiny, amazing, everything is great. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about that wasn't the case for you, a little bit about your childhood and your early adult life?
Oh gosh, where do I start? So you mentioned my book Reach, which I wrote when I was in my early 20s when I first decided to box, because there was a lot of people had their opinions about why is she boxing? Is she using it as a publicity stunt? She's too pretty to be a boxer. Women don't box. Like, why would you want to do this? You don't need to box. Most people box because they have to, because they have nothing else they can do. So I felt the need to really share, my experience, because, you never know what someone has been through, right? You never know what experiences have made them the person that they are and gave them the strength that they have to face, their life. So um, growing up, obviously being Muhammad Ali's daughter, having people around all of the time, never having any privacy. I kind of shied away from that. I naturally just didn't really like that. And obviously, when I was a kid, I didn't realize this, but as I'm looking back, I always wanted to get away from that. So I always kind of would venture off and find friends that weren't necessarily my father's friends' kids or people who, were wealthy or anything like that, right? I really could connect with regular, everyday people with parents that had everyday jobs. And sometimes I also would hang around people that were in neighborhoods that weren't the best place for me to be, because I didn't really know anything about it. And I always had an attitude about myself. Like, I was very confident and kind of not afraid of anything. And when you're in certain neighborhoods and you might have on name brand clothes and they didn't have it, they look at you like, oh, you think you're better than me? And I was kind of like, what, you got a problem? So I was that kid that kind of got in trouble growing up. I had a really dysfunctional upbringing when my parents got divorced and my mom remarried, and her husband was very abusive to her mentally and emotionally. And, my mom wasn't present at all and pretty much abandoned us. And we were left to kind of fend for ourselves growing up. I'm talking about to the extent of when we moved far away, from all of our friends and family, like an hour away. And when you're like 11 and 12 years old and you're moving an hour away from your best friends, that's that's really hard to deal with, right? And living with this person that was a monster, basically. And we had this house that was divided, where it had a house and a guest house attached. Well, we lived in the guest house. Well, it came a point where he started locking the door to come into the house. So I literally, at 12 years old, am living on my own, basically, where I had to call my mom on the phone, right? Like, mom, we're hungry. Mom, asking her, and she's not waking me up to go to school. She's not making sure I do my homework. She's not cooking dinner. She's not doing any of that. So a lot of times now, like with my spice blends and my cookbook and how into cooking I am, people are like, oh, where'd you learn to cook? And I'm like, oh, I taught myself. But they don't really realize the story behind how I actually started cooking, because I had to. So, I mean, I guess I didn't have to, because my sister doesn't cook, because I cooked for us. But I naturally got an interest in it and got passionate about it. But with all that being said, as you can imagine, that was a very traumatic time in my life, to feel abandoned by your mother. My father lived in a different state at that time, and he was going through his Parkinson's, and it was always kind of like, don't upset daddy. Like, he couldn't deal with so much, and he didn't really know everything that was going on. And, being at that age when you're, starting to like boys, trying to find yourself, there was so much going on that my mom didn't really know about. Long story short, I kind of started going down the wrong path because I was angry, I was resentful, and, and my mother right? Because I was like a mama's girl and I felt like my mom had abandoned me. And like, I can't believe you're gonna let this guy do this to us. And then it was a secret, which is hard for kids to a child to keep. It was embarrassing. Like, I didn't want everyone to know that I was locked on one side of the house and that we were living this way. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that was a heavy weight to carry. And long story short, it really had an effect on my grades. I started getting in trouble because I already had this fighting spirit and kind of rebel without a cause kind of attitude. And I ended up in trouble. I ended up getting on probation. I wasn't going to school. I ended up at one point getting locked up in juvenile hall, and I stayed there for 3 months. And then when I left juvenile hall, I had to go to a placement, a group home, because they were like, your home isn't fit for you. Like, where was your mom? Why does she not know what's going on? You need therapy, all these things. Took me out of the home, and I had to graduate the program. And they said I'd be there for at least a year. No one graduates before a year. And me being as ambitious as I am, I was like, I am not staying here for a year. I was like, what do I need to do to get out of here? Give me all the information. I'm going to be good. I'm going to do everything I need to do. I'm going to do my schoolwork. I'm going to do my chores. And I graduated the program in 6 months by the time I was 18. And I mean, before I turned 18, because it was around 16 and a half that I went. Um, no, actually, I was about 17 and a half. So anyway, I don't know. I'm mixing my numbers up, but it was before I was 18 that I was able to go home and get my life back on track. And that is when I saw, I'm skipping around a little bit because I can't go through the whole book, but I saw women's boxing on television for the first time around 18 and a half. I didn't even know it existed. And right then I was like, oh my God, this is so me. This is right up my alley. I wanted to do it. But again, you got someone who had no discipline, who didn't play any sports because I was too busy ditching school and wanting to be grown and getting in trouble. And I went home that night dreaming about becoming a professional boxer. But then, of course, I woke up the next morning with all the fear and doubt and, oh, how am I going to do that? I don't know anything about boxing. What's everyone going to think? What's my father going to think? And I talked myself out of it. So a whole year went by before I actually listened to that voice that had been irking me for like that whole year and started, training. I went to a gym to see if I actually had any talent. Did I think I could do this? Because I was always very smart. I had a lot of common sense, and I was a very practical person from the time I was a kid. And I thought this is going to be a big deal. Muhammad Ali's daughter becoming a boxer, being a woman, and me and my father, I knew he wasn't going to like it, but I knew that wasn't going to matter if I wanted to do it. But I had to make sure that I had the passion and the desire and the basic skill set to be able to learn how to box and become a world champion. I never just wanted to box. I was like, I want to be a world champion. I saw myself being able to do it, but I wanted to make sure that I could. So I started training, and the trainers were like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you got it." Of course they were gonna say that regardless because they wanted to make money, but I didn't know at the time.
Right.
But and I started boxing. So I'm gonna leave it there, and then you can ask me any
Yeah.
questions you want.
So this is incredible. I love this story so much. Again, go read the book Reach if you haven't read it because it is so, so powerful. Again, you can get it at LailaAli.com. But so what happened in your head when you're in juvie, you go to juvie, you go to the group home? There had to have been a point of where you realized, okay, I'm at a crossroads. I can either continue down this path and probably end up in jail or end up accomplishing at least nothing or nothing good, to I'm going to channel all of that energy into something positive like boxing, knowing that no female has done this. It's not on TV. My dad's not going to like it. At what point, when you felt like you're at that crossroads, what made you go to boxing versus the other way?
So because I had gotten in trouble lots of times, I had this attitude about myself. I used to steal my mom's car and tell her, I'm going to steal it again. I'm going to take it whenever I want to, and you're not going to stop me. I mean, I was bad. Okay. I needed to get locked up, really, because my mom had no control. I didn't respect her, because again, I'm the type of person, I'm going to judge you like, look what you're doing to us. Look what you're letting him do to you. So I don't respect you. You're not going to tell me anything. You see what I'm saying? So
Exactly.
I was just doing my own thing. And the moment I got locked up, when the judge was like, you're not going home, because I was there for my court date. And I just thought, I had told my friends, girl, I'm going to court. I'll see you later. We're going to go to the club. And it's like, oh no, they put me in handcuffs and took me behind the court. I started crying and looked at my mom, and it was real. Like, having my freedom taken away from me and going and having to strip down and put on county underwear and a county orange suit and just be like, where's my mom? When am I going to be able to talk to her? Where am I going? Where are you taking me? It's just having your freedom taken away is the worst thing ever, right? And just not knowing, being uncertain about your future. So that really, in that moment, was all I needed. But then it was too late. I was already there, right? And then having the opportunity to see all these girls who really had bad situations. Not that mine wasn't. You can never compare your situation to someone else's. And it's whatever you're going through, how it makes you feel inside, right? How it kind of chips away at your spirit. It's like all the situations can be different, but the feeling that you have inside is the same, right? So I don't compare the actual situation, but seeing all these girls who I would be there and they would leave and get in trouble and then come back the next weekend and be back like it was like funny to them. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, there's no way I would ever do anything to come back here, you know? And so I really had the opportunity to see, like, okay, I really have to get my stuff together. These people don't have any support system. I'm talking about, I had family and friends outside of my mom, right? People who cared about me, people who I could look up to, who would make sure I was going to be okay. So some of these people didn't have any of that. So back then I did think, God, their situation is worse than mine, even though, like I said, I know better now. But I never taken away from what I had been through, right? But to answer your question, yes, that just being locked up, having my freedom taken away, and then having the opportunity to get to know the girls in the group home. Part of what you have to do is have group every day. It's like with a psychologist, and sit there and tell these stories, and hearing their stories and everything they had been through really just changed me as a person, gave me the opportunity to hear, because I was Muhammad Ali's daughter. I did grow up and have money and have the things that I wanted, and lived in a nice neighborhood. And some of these kids were forced to have incest with their brother and sister, and their parents are charging people to watch. I mean, stuff like that. So I'm just like, wow, right? I have no excuse. You know what I mean? I have no excuse not to get my stuff together. So leaving there really changed me, and having the opportunity to be like, no, you have to do these chores and you have to do your schoolwork in order to earn a weekend pass to go home. I had to earn that. I had to earn my freedom back to leave there. And it really just set the foundation of like who I am and the work that it takes. So just when you've been through something like that, things just don't seem like a big of a deal. Like, I'm definitely not a diva, and I'm like, oh, I gotta have candles in my dressing room and Avion water. It's just like, I'm good. Like, I've been in a cell before, you know what I mean, with nothing, and I've had to use the bathroom, in front of people with no privacy, and take showers in front of people with no privacy. So again, that never goes away. Just that feeling of like, okay, I can deal with anything. This isn't a big deal, because I've been through some stuff that was a big deal. So my perception is going to be absolutely different than anyone else's.
Right. And I will say, we met when I was 22 years old. I'm 37 now. I've known you for a long time, and I've never gotten the holier than thou feeling from you ever. You've been with me through 3 different companies throughout my whole career, and we worked together. It just happened to be at all the companies that I've been at, and you have always been you. And I will say, like, Laila is always on time. So all the famous people out there, be on time, okay? Because that's one thing I try and instill in my children is like, when your time is showing up on time is so important, because it tells the other people that their time is as valuable as yours. When you are late, it sends a message of disrespect. But so one thing I want to ask 2 full questions is, one, if there are young women out there listening to this, and parents of young women listening to this, what advice do you have for both the young women and the parents, that when they see their child, being disrespectful, like you said, like your mom couldn't control you, like what do you want to say to those young women that might be acting that way? And what advice as a parent now do you have for them? Like, what would you say to them to get them before they get to juvie? Like, what can you say to help both the young girls that are in it and the parents that are trying to manage it?
I put a lot of weight on parenting, in terms of the outcome of your children and their mindset of how they're going to look at life, look at themselves, and look at you. And it's a lot. We have a lot of responsibility. And I will say that for parents, your kids are always watching, right? We know that. It's not what you say, it's what you do. They see how you treat others, they see how you treat yourself, they see how you let people treat you. Okay. So, my kids, for example, sometimes I embarrass them, like, why did you talk to that person like that? Because I'm kind of straightforward and kind of snappy and straight to the point. Sometimes it comes off as just being rude to some people, because people just aren't used to that a lot of times, even though I rather people be that way. Let me know what's on your mind. I don't want to have to wonder. Just let me know and let me deal with it.
Direct.
Just be direct. Yeah, I may like it, I may not, but just let me know. I don't want to wonder. So I like that about myself, so I'm not going to change it. But I'm saying I think it's important because, my kids are going to grow up, especially expecting people to treat them with respect, treating others with respect, because they see how I treat people, right? And I also encourage them to speak up. I encourage them, tell me how you feel. They don't agree with something. I'm like, I don't care, shut up, just do what I tell you. I'm like, well, why do you not? I say, well, why do you feel that way? And some parents don't believe in that, but I want my kids to have that muscle trained that their opinion counts. They can speak up. It doesn't mean they're going to have things their way, but I don't want them afraid to talk, afraid to speak, right? So they're going to be, because they're allowed to do that at home, they're going to expect to do it in relationships, they're going to expect to do it in the workplace. So that's just training that we get early on. And I would say that we really need to be present for our children. We need to listen to them. We need to put down our phones. And I have to remind myself sometimes because I'm always busy doing this, doing that. And they're talking to me. I'm like, ha, 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 ha. And we're just not really fully present. 3 years goes by, they grew up, all these things. You're like, oh my God, where did the time go, right? So it's really important to stop everything so that they understand that they're important, and they don't come last. And then a lot of times we can catch some of these things that they're going through. In my situation, I mean, my mom, obviously, the abandonment, not being there was obvious what was wrong, right? So that was a different situation. But without it being that extreme, we can be in the same household together. I think it's important for us to sit down, have dinner together. I don't care if you're not cooking, if you're eating out, at least once a day. Find out what's going on in your kid's life, find out how they feel, right? Be able to give them some advice so that they're not having to make these decisions on their own. And for kids, they need to, or young people, I mean, we need to be able to share how we're feeling, and speak up, because your parents cannot read your mind. If you don't say what's on your mind, you can't expect people to figure it out and then be resentful and mad when they don't figure it out. And I think that that's something just for adults. I mean, even us, we sometimes, even in relationships, husband and wife, it's like, he didn't notice this or he doesn't notice that. It's like he may not notice because we're wired differently, and people have things going on. So you can't expect people to just know. You have to speak up and let people know how you feel. And I truly believe you can say anything. You can say anything. It's just how you say it to people,
Mhm.
right? It's really your choice of
Presentation.
words, presentation, and coming at people in a respectful way. And you can say pretty much anything.
Now, when you look back at, you look at Layla now, you look at yourself now in 2021, and you look back and you reflect when you were in the thick of it, in the most challenging times in your life. What tools did you personally use that helped you persevere through those challenging times?
You know, I always believed in myself. I never gave up on myself. And that's something that I will never do. I just know innately that I'm just like, it's going to work out. I don't know how. I don't know exactly, what all is going to happen along the way, but it's going to work out. And I truly believe that everything happens as it's supposed to. We may not understand, why things are happening the way that they are. We don't see the other side, but this is what life is about. Life is really about going through things, going through these challenges, and you learning from them, right? And we
Hmm.
don't always know during the process what that lesson is or why. Because a lot of times people are like, why me, God? Why me? Why me? Well, could it be someone else? You know what I mean? This is like we can go through many stories while you're doing this podcast of people who've gone through challenges and had to persevere. And, some stories are so heart wrenching, and then you can look at someone and they can be talking about it in the past tense, right?
Hmm.
So we know that just from experience over years. I think about Nelson Mandela. I mean, this is the kind of things I think about, okay, that minimize,
Hmm.
because it's all mental.
Hmm.
So whatever you need to do, okay, to minimize the severity of the situation so that you can calm your little self down and be like, okay, I can handle this. You see what I'm saying? I think about Nelson Mandela, like he was locked up for 27 years in a jail
Right.
cell. Like, how do you in this little room live and not just give up and say, well, hell, I'm just gonna just kill me now? And then come
Right.
out and start living his life again after all those years of just trying to do good. And if he
Hmm.
would have sat there and let, his anger and resentment and, God, why me, eat at him, he wouldn't have lived.
Right.
It came out of old man.
Right. The perspective is it's a lot of times it's changing the perspective. Like a lot of times if I hear someone say, why me? My immediate reaction is that's not the right question. The right question is, if you're saying, God, why me? The better question is, God, help me through this. I know I can get through this with you. And I love that your tip on don't give up, always believe in yourselves and put things into perspective. And I think we tend to get overwhelmed when we look at the giant picture, right? So, like when you're in juvie for 3 months, like, oh God, how am I going to make it through 3 months? Okay, let me just make it through this day. Let me just make it through this hour and let me choose to be positive and believe in myself to get through this hour and just take it a little bit at a time. I just love that. I think that's such an important tool. And then, to move your career forward, you go and you have this amazing boxing career to the point where like you pretty much stop fighting because there's no one left to fight. And and then in 2012, the Olympics finally allow women's boxing into the Olympics. This was, after you had retired, you didn't compete, but then you become the first female to ever do color commentary for boxing. And I know from all the conversations that we have, like boxing is an ugly industry, like period. Now you put in the first woman ever to try and be in that industry. Like what was that like and what was the biggest challenge of that time?
I just want to make something clear. I wasn't trying to be in the industry because a lot of people have asked me, well, why don't you train or why don't you promote? And I'm not interested in that. I was only interested in fighting. But of course, for the Olympics, it's a one-time thing, like
Mhm.
to for a short period of time, and to be the voice representing women's boxing in the Olympics was not something I was going to pass on, and it was an amazing opportunity. I didn't have an amateur boxing career, so I didn't have a big background on amateur boxing. Of course, I always do my studying, but it was really great to see. And I was like, man, I wish I would have had this opportunity because now it's really going to inspire girls all around the world to compete in a sport that they can actually go far in terms of fighting for their country. A lot of endorsement deals and things can come from being in the Olympics if you handle your career right. So it was just a wonderful opportunity because I know how hard women have been boxing, and I wasn't the first boxer. There was boxers before me. It just wasn't a publicized sport.
Mhm.
Christy Martin was the first female to get notoriety and exposure because she was put on Mike Tyson's undercard. And that's when I saw women's boxing for the first time. So I was the first one to do it with the name. And there'll never be another Laila Ali. There'll never be another Muhammad Ali's daughter. That's a big force behind you. But I had to fight 10 times harder than everybody else because everybody fought me harder. And it really goes to show that I mean, even to be his daughter and to be undefeated and all that, I still wasn't making a lot of money or having all these different opportunities. You know what I mean? Because a woman in
No,
boxing.
and like explain. I remember that one of the first conversations you and I had about boxing is you were like, Lise, The one thing, because I think I had asked you if you ever would want your children to get into boxing, and you were like, absolutely not. The one thing that people don't know about boxing, especially when you boxed, is there's no regulations. There's no rules, there's no governing body, there's no, your trainer, your manager, your whoever can just take as much money from you as they want. There are no, like, boxing, I don't even want to say this, but it is shady as hell.
Yeah, yeah, it's shady, and things may have changed now. I need to check into that, but I'll say, like anyone can be a trainer. That's what I'm saying. It's not like the NFL or the NBA where you got to get drafted and all this kind of stuff. I could just at 18 just be like, oh, I want to become a boxer and be put in a fight and just be put in there with someone who has all this experience. You know what I mean? And like just as an opponent, and then get knocked out and get brain damage. So you just never know. But that's what I mean in terms of regulation. And then anyone could be a trainer, anyone could be a promoter, anyone could be a manager. So you have that. You have a lot of times street people getting in there for the wrong reasons, you know. So you definitely have to make sure that you're surrounded by the right people and the right team. And it's a crazy sport. And I just wouldn't want my daughter to do it when she could go play tennis or play golf or play something that she's going to be safe and she's going to make a whole lot more money.
Right. Aside from the fact that, like, okay, you're literally getting punched in the face for a living, aside from that, there's no protection of the athlete. Like, and by protection, I don't mean physical protection. I mean, there's nobody making sure you're not getting money shaved off your fights. There's nobody protecting your name, image, and likeness. Like, there's nobody, literally anybody could walk up and say, I'm going to be a boxing agent tomorrow, and literally go up to an athlete and say, "Oh, I'm an agent. Come, let me represent you." There's no regulation for that. And to navigate that world as a female, and then as Muhammad Ali's daughter, my goodness, the pressure and the notoriety of that is just,
Yeah,
it's
well,
hard to even think about.
just imagine that when I became a boxer, my father didn't like it. He told me not to do it. It's not for you. It's not a woman's sport. It's too hard. And I don't want you to do it. Now, this is at 19 years old, the greatest of all time. My father telling me it's not for you. It's not for women. It's too hard and you shouldn't do it. So imagine what kind of girl that takes to tell her father, oh, well, you may be the greatest of all time and you may be one of the most famous loved men in the world. But guess what? This is my life. And I've already made this choice and I've thought long and hard about his baby. Now, what do you know at 19, right? But I knew what was in my heart and I knew what I was willing to work hard for. And I was like, I love you, Dad, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then my
Mhm.
dad, ended up supporting me and he came back, a few years later, a couple years later, after I won my first world title. And I remember him coming and apologizing and saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. You can fight and women can fight and I'm proud of you. And I started crying and we both started crying and hugging each other because I had told myself, I don't care what he thinks, I'm going to do this and I'm going to show him, you got to get that, you got to keep that armor. I call it armor
Mhm.
on. And, even him, I had something to prove, and I told myself I didn't care, but I did care. And I did want his approval and I did want him to tell me he was proud of me. And, that's something out of all my father has 9 kids. I'm the only one that became a boxer and I'm the only one that shared that ring experience with him. So we have a special connection.
I've never asked you this before. What's one thing that you take from your dad that you use every day, or that you hold in your heart the most?
My father, even though he was, again, the most famous, loved man in the world, he never treated people like he was better. He never looked down on anybody. He always took the time to look people in the eye. He gave hugs and kisses and autographs no matter what. He's missed flights, you know, taking care of a line, which we didn't understand. We're like, Dad, we don't need to miss our flight. He's like, but imagine being that last person where you cut the line off. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to cut the line off at some point. But
Hmm.
he just loved people, and that's something that, you just can't, I can't even explain the type of spirit that he had. And just seeing him fight through his Parkinson's because it was a challenge for him to travel and do his humanitarian work, to write autographs really slow, and to have just people. I mean, whenever we be eating, they come up to you, sorry, we don't want to interrupt, but it's like, you know how many times we hear that? Oh,
Yeah.
this is just the last autograph. No, it's not, because there's more people behind you, and it's like, but people just seize the moment, and he was okay with it. And it was he didn't hide behind. This is that man that was just loud and talkative and brash and doing his thing, and all of a sudden he can't talk, and he's shaking, and he's drooling, and he's in public, and he didn't try to hide it. So he had so much dignity. And he also wanted other people who have Parkinson's or any disease, to see that they didn't have to be ashamed.
Mhm.
So that's something that, like, again, like I said, just how much my father loved humanity, even as ugly as we can be sometimes, he still saw the good in people, which, is truly inspiring to me.
Ugh, and CJ looks just like him.
Oh my God. And I love that. Oh, trust me. I'm taking that. I tell all my sisters, I got the one that looks like daddy, because none of his grandkids look like him. And then nobody used the name Muhammad. So CJ Muhammad Conway. I'm like, so yeah, I love it.
I
He looks
know. It's
just
so,
like him.
we're talking about her son, by the way, to our listeners. Her son looks just like her daddy. It's so, so sweet. It must, just having that little, that reminder of having his presence with you. And like I said, look, like, it wasn't easy, but I think it's so important that you take the warm stuff with you, and you don't hold the grudge for the not so good stuff, because you had to,
Absolutely.
it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Like you said, you are one of 9 of his kids.
And look, it's still not easy. There's still challenges. I think that when you go through things and you come through them, you already have inside of you knowing, okay, this too shall pass. So the first time someone deals with something big and heavy is harder, I think. But I've been through so much, so now it doesn't shake you as much. But I expect more challenges in life. It's never just gonna be smooth sailing. You know,
Mhm.
and I encourage people not to let their past or what they're going through right now define who they are.
Mhm.
It's like, no, we're not going to let that define you, because we have challenges, that we have to face. And it's only going to make you stronger, when you figure that out. And then you're going to be able to help somebody else that might be going through the same thing or something similar.
Right. Last question. Same question I ask every one of our guests. What is your final message of hope that you want other people to know?
I am a very spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. Which is, my father, I remember telling him at 9 years old that I didn't want to be Muslim. And you can imagine that was like, what? What my father had been through for his religion. He's like, you're too young to know what you want. You're only 9. I said, I know what's in my heart, and that's not in my heart. And what could he say? So it's like, I truly, from a young age, and it's not always easy for people to do, I know I follow my heart, I follow my intuition. And you just have to really check yourself sometimes and get centered, and make sure that your intentions are pure. So no matter what you're going through, no matter who you're dealing with, we don't know what decision to make sometimes. We don't know what the answer is. It's like, you want to go with the good intentions, right? Not to be hurtful to anybody, to do what's best for you and your family. And then that's the right answer. And you just have to trust that. I'm someone who, rather, if something doesn't go my way because of one of my decisions that I made, I can live with that. What I don't want to do is listen to somebody else and go with what they say I should do when I didn't really feel right with it in the first place, and then be like, damn, I shouldn't have listened to that person. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that once you can really learn in life to, in each moment, like you said, not in a big overwhelming way. I'm talking about day to day, because life is just a collection of decisions that we make at the end of the day.
Mhm.
We make on a day-to-day basis. If you say you want to change careers, or if you want to get better at something, what are you spending your time doing every day? Are you practicing? Are you doing research? Are you trying to take steps in that direction? Or you're going to look back up 3 months ago, man, I haven't done anything to go after that goal. So it's like it's a collection of every day and how you spend your time and your thoughts and all of that. So again, just trying to follow your heart, follow your intentions. And again, because I mean, what can I say? We're all going through something. You may or may not know it. Someone's always dealing with something, and some of us can hide that better or just don't share it or whatever. Maybe if you just ask, they might tell you, but
Mhm.
that's just life. But it's about how you balance it and how you manage it, and what your mindset is how, how successful you're going to be going through it.
I love that. And you give me hope that my Spitfire daughter is gonna grow up to be okay because she's got already at 4 or 5 years old, she's got the attitude that you had, I think, as a teenager. So, but you give me hope. You know what, I call her the squirrel on fire at all times, but you give me hope. What did those children grow up to be? They grow up to be Laila Ali, folks. So
Yes.
thank you so much for being candid with us and vulnerable and sharing your stories of perseverance with all of us. If you have any further questions or comments for myself or Laila, please visit our website, neverloseyourcape.com, and send us a note in the contact us section. And if you ever want to check out anything that Laila's doing right now, go to LailaAli.com. She has all of her cooking, her spicing, her books, her apparel, everything that she's got, her full lifestyle brand at LailaAli.com. And remember, to see the video version of this episode, visit neverloseyourcape.com. Laila, thank you so much. It's such a
Thank you.
great joy and a blessing every time I get to talk to you.
Thank you. All the best to you and your podcast.
Thank you.